So one thing that I'd like to mention before I completely forget about it is that I was talking to students recently about what it's like to interview a celebrity. And, in my career of attending, like, I can't believe that I'm this old. And when I think about these stats, I kind of like, whoa, it's insane. Of like literally attending Fashion Week for 13 years and going to roughly, I think, 1,300 shows, which might even be a low ball number because I went with the low average when I was thinking about it for each season. And then the opportunity to go backstage, usually before the show, and interview designers, key leads, sometimes celebrities. I did this show with, so as a blogger, I'm part of a blog network, and my blog has been around for a while. And so I did this like series with them during Fashion Week for a few years that was exhausting. But I would basically conduct a lot of interviews, and they would, obviously edit these clips and stream them together. But it would be like interviews backstage with, again, like makeup artists and stuff, the key leads for that, with celebrities backstage, celebrities at the show, celebrities in the venue, designers, and then just like random show attendees. And then it developed into this other series a couple years later called Street Peek, where I would like interview people on the street. And for myself personally, like, I don't want to say I'm an introvert 100%, but like I'm a Cancer, like I'm kind of a homebody, like I'm definitely shy. My dad gets really mad about it, that I've gotten better living in New York City all these years, but that I don't speak up, I'm soft, I'm timid. Definitely a little better than I was when I came here for college, but that doing these kind of things, these interviews, like in person and off the cuff, and like getting people to kind of speak to you, kind of last minute like that, and just kind of walking up to them with a mic and a video guy, it's like, people cannot be that receptive of it sometimes. And to do that really pushed me outside of my comfort zone a lot. And, I think in a lot of ways it was good, because like I wouldn't have really wanted to do that otherwise, unless I was asked. In my style of it was my personality. So it was like very down to earth and like giggly and normal and I guess relatable, as I've had media training for jobs in the past, when I was an editor at another publication. And so they did it because they wanted me to, go on TV and talk about products, and especially seasonally, what are like the top 10 Christmas gifts and stuff like that. So I've had media training, but it seems like every time I'm in front of a camera, like all of that stuff just goes out the door and I completely forget about it. Which is kind of funny, because it totally defeats the point of having it. But basically, at first, when I would interview these people, like especially too if you're if it's someone that you've admired for a really long time, like designers who like clothes you've always wanted to buy, or it was like your first handbag or anything like that, like you really want to totally fan out, but you gotta play it super cool. And the way that I've really kind of like thought about it is almost as if like I'm in a sensory deprivation tank and I'm like floating outside of my body. Like, not really, but I think about it from the sense that like when I'm interviewing this celebrity, like I've already prepared a little bit, hopefully, and I'm not going to ask them standard questions that, have been asked before. Hopefully not, because they get irritated with that. They get tired of that, and you can see that they're over it because they're like not really as smiley, and they're kind of looking around, and they're giving you very short answers. So my thing is that like I try to be so super friendly and respectful when I talk to them, but I also kind of check out. So like when I'm talking to them, like I'm definitely fully present, but like let's say I'm talking to, I don't know, like name any celebrity. Like, I'm trying to think of who I've interviewed who's been like a big celebrity of Fashion Week. I've like interviewed a bunch of people from like 30 Rock, which is really cool. Like Jane Krakowski, she's used to go to the fashion shows a lot while the show was still on the air. I'm friends, with a few stylists that are famous, so I've interviewed them for stuff. But like Nicole Miller is like one designer that I've interviewed a few times. And I think by like the second time she recognized me, and I also knew that I was going backstage for the show. So I wore something Nicole Miller, which super helped. By the way, if there's a way that you can do that, like it's not corny. Like designers actually really appreciate it. I've done it a few times when I've gone backstage for Mara Hoffman. And she's a very shy person as well, and she's very sweet, and she, is incredibly talented, and she isn't too big on interviews, but when I've gone backstage, she's like, and I'm wearing something from her collection, she's like smiling at me, and she, at one time she even said like, that looks awesome on you, and I was like, oh my god, that is the coolest thing ever, but, I thought about it, and I, diligently, decided that whenever I have the opportunity to do something like that. So that's one kind of tip. But the other thing, going back to being like kind of outside of my body and checking out, is that when I'm interviewing these celebrities, like, especially if it's something that's kind of more off kilter, I'm not processing the fact that I'm speaking to a superstar designer, or celebrity of any kind. Like I try to make myself forget that, and not think about it at all. And I don't know how it works, but it totally works for me, because until I thought about doing this, like I would be so nervous, and like I swear I was like visibly shaking. And then when I just kind of started to think about it, like that whole idea of like celebrities, they're just like us. That, I just totally became more natural and at ease in the interview process. So if you ever have the opportunity to interview someone, it doesn't have to be a celebrity, it can be someone you really admire. Just kind of don't psych yourself out by psyching yourself up, too much about it. I think just, in a very real tip, just kind of just try to ease into it and think that, you're just having a really casual conversation that's obviously a little structured with someone that you're just starting to get to know. And I really think it helps. Like one of my favorite, I guess, things that I've heard was kind of from, a fangirl moment was at, in Amy Poehler's book, she talks about being backstage at SNL and meeting Prince. And she was so starstruck by it that she just says like, so how was your summer? And she like laughs about it now and thinks like, what a jerk, like I can't believe I said that to Prince. But I think that that's like the coolest thing ever, because you're not, you're not being like, oh my god, like your music is amazing, like I love you so much, oh my god, Purple Rain, like, and then all you're really going to get from that person on the other end is just like, oh, thank you so much, that's so nice to hear, thank you, and like the conversation is dead. So, I think thinking about that, about ways to kind of develop a conversation, getting more than just an answer, creating questions that are beyond a yes and no answer, and also trying to stay calm, and think about this person being a person and not a celebrity is pretty important. So just a little tidbit that again went on way longer than I intended, so sorry. But now we're going to get into more of the structured nitty-gritty interviewing 101. It's a little bit outside of the realm of copy editing, actually, but these are the most common perpetrators across the board that a lot of you guys have in your papers. And from a professional standpoint, if you are making those mistakes from a writing capacity, that an editor is really going to be over it. And so that could be the difference between you getting a job again and not. And if you don't correct these items, it would definitely be not. So that's why, in your assignments, I want you to really treat them, and in the discussion board, putting your most professional face forward, because all these things really matter, especially since this is a writing class. If it was a fashion history class or something else, then maybe it wouldn't be as big of a deal. You should still care and still want to improve those things, but in the scope of fashion writing, everything's on the table. And my job is to make sure that you guys have come in, at a good level with your writing, but come out of it with a ton of experience, with writing for fashion, and that your writing has also been, enhanced and elevated. And you also have a bunch of insider and background knowledge as to how, to go about writing pieces, soliciting, pitches, putting together interviews, and the like. So we're getting there. It's still early on, but into the semester enough that, now the ball is definitely rolling. And the book is really helpful. There's really not too many books that I can say from a fashion college standpoint that are relevant that I found. It seems that a lot of them get outdated really quickly because of the examples that they use and things like that. It feels kind of stale. But this book is really, really good. It comes in with the assumption that you're enthusiastic and want to try out a bunch of different forms of writing within the realm of fashion, and gives you really solid, sturdy, information and examples of things to try and how to get there. So with some of our homework assignments, it will be specifically the book, just to give you guys some exercise practice. Other times, you'll be asked to read things from the book, and we may do a separate kind of writing assignment. And then, like the past several weeks, it's been a combination of writing with, doing an assignment that is related to the book, and then another separate assignment that is exercising your writing. So we're going to move on from ourselves, because I think we've probably beat that to death at this point, writing and talking about ourselves. But these little things that you've written in this class, if you've done it well and you like it, are things that once you start, to write, you can pick those up and use those, as part of your career. So for your bio, for a website or a blog, which is something actually that's, coming down the pipeline. That we're going to do, which I'm really excited to do with you guys. And I think that you can use it like as part of your bio. You could there's many different capacities, to plug in a bio or that you'd be asked for it. But having a good foundational one is really helpful. So each time someone asks, you don't have to completely rewrite it, which is annoying and stresses me out. But I usually just take, the template of one that I've already written for my blog, and then might just slightly tweak it. But it's always something really good to have, and also to kind of think about. I ask you guys to really develop your opinion and your critical sense, and we do that in the discussion boards, and that's great. But also, in the assignments, when applicable, that I want you guys to really think about, looking at the facts, looking at the information, and inserting your own voice into that. And so, I think laying a foundational place where you think about your fashion, experiences and memory is a really strong, important one, because we don't oftentimes take pause to do that or to think about it. Like, you may see something in the back of your closet and it might kind of, in a flash, bring back a memory, but we might just dwell on that memory and not really think a little bit more deeper about what it means, to us and how it impacted our lives. And, all these things are so tied in. And again, thinking about the concept of macro and micro, that in a good article, especially, with a focus like the New York Times, they almost always focus on an individual. They may start, an article with an individual, then go out more general to thinking about society, and then end with a quote about that individual, from that individual. So I think it just kind of reiterates the cycle of, of thinking about how, our society and our, individual selves and our sense of culture and fashion are linked. And so I think, kind of identifying these patterns in thinking and writing will just make you guys stronger writers. And I know this isn't the only class you have and the only thing that you have to contemplate, but if you really care about developing, your intellectual level as a fashion writer and thinker, that these are the kind of things that you'll want to dwell on a little bit, and maybe even, read some other books that relate to this kind of thing. So I'm going to continue on, kind of shifting gears a little bit. And before I do, I just want to mention that the podcast as an interview medium is absolutely fascinating. It's so funny that, in a time when everything is becoming so increasingly visual in so many ways, that the podcast has gained popularity. I mean, I think it's fantastic. I think it's a really interesting way to connect with people and to learn about new things, and especially where we are in New York City, that we're kind of on sensory overload, and we put headphones in our ears and go about our day, go about our commute, and I think that by doing that, it kind of creates our own environment in our own private space in a world of so much noise and chaos going on around us. So I really kind of like the idea. Again, this is an audio file that I've created. I really like the aspect of that. Also, my hair looks terrible today, so I don't want to show you guys that. But in all seriousness, I don't know if you guys subscribe to podcasts, but I think that there is quite a bit of value in listening to them, and not only listening to them for the content, but also the formula in which each of these podcasts run, and also for the interview style. So, I read the book Girl Boss by Sophia Amoruso, and I don't know if you guys also read it or how you feel about it, but I liked the book enough when I read it. But Sophia and her friend Liz do, the Girl Boss podcast, and I find that their banter in the beginning of the podcast is the most incredibly annoying thing, that it almost makes me nauseous. Like, I cannot deal. But they have a really solid formula in which they have like a very personal conversation, and like pretty much everything is up for grabs that they talk about, and it's like basically about their week. And then they read girl boss moments from people who have been inspired by the book, by, it's not a movement, but really just thinking about kind of taking ownership of your life, of doing something awesome for yourself. And so they read usually like 3 or so of these girl boss moments from fans, from readers who have written in, and then they go into the interview. And so even though I'm telling you like the first third of this each podcast is annoying because like I don't really like their banter, it's not the formula, it's them. But the reason why I listen to it is that they have really fascinating guests. Really, like, they give you, exposure and insight to a lot of female entrepreneurs that are very successful and doing really awesome things. And I think that, hearing an interview like this, which is like you're kind of listening in, right? And it's an intimate setting, and they do have a plan and a structure for the interview where they ask, the beginning of each interview, what was your first job? And so they ask for like, what was your first crap job? So like maybe when you were in high school, you flipped burgers at a restaurant or something, or what was your first real job? So like your first internship, or once you're into your career. And I always love that question. I think it's really interesting to kind of start off with that, because usually someone has a first crap job that, can solicit some laughs. So, and then, throughout the interview, there are some structured questions, but for the most part, Liz leaves, and Sophia is relatively quiet, and she really just lets the interviewee speak. So this person speaks for, sometimes up to like a half an hour or so. And I really like that because I think that they've set the stage for a really comfortable, open conversation, which allows this to happen almost every single time. And I think that's really valuable. And so I think they're smart, in the formula that they've devised, where they have really strong branding, where it's consistent and it's this girl boss, overarching theme. So regardless if you like it or not, it is a good example, to kind of look at for structure, for not necessarily even from a podcast standpoint, but also for one from like a branding, of a blog or an Instagram account or something. But it's like having a really strong, consistent theme and detected formula is something that readers, listeners really gravitate toward. And it's really important. And so, I want you guys to keep that in mind, as you're kind of building up your writing skills and, maybe layering more pieces towards a blog. But also, think about the podcast. Think about its rise in popularity and how that might be significant and what it might signify, in our society as a whole. But, the interview, aspect of it, I think is really good. And I think that each podcast does it a little differently, depending on the function of the podcast and the person's, interviewing skills. But most of them seem to have a very specific theme and a very specific kind of guest that they have in mind that they generally have on their show. So just little things that you might not necessarily think about or, break down a little bit. But I'd like to, think about a little bit more with you guys in this class. And of course, we're going to be listening to some girl boss podcast. So don't worry, I'll give you the break as to where the interview starts, so that if you want to go right to that and not listen to the banter in the beginning, you can. But I think that, I have a couple of people that they've interviewed that are industry specific from the point of being, in the editorial realm, that I think you'll really enjoy. So that is coming down the pipeline. And I've already talked a lot longer than I thought I would. But I'm going to just take a quick pause, and then we're going to go on to some skill set regarding interviewing.